like we said, I have the privilege of having my family here this weekend, and I'll try and not say as many bad things about them in this service. But no, I have loved having them here. It's kind of a different pace, hosting your parents. It's definitely something new for me. I found myself doing the dishes and getting ready and doing all the things that they've always asked me to do at their house, that I never wanted to do, just getting ready for them to be here. And I've had a great weekend. And I also found myself, when I was giving them the little tour of our town and taking them around, I found myself calling it home several times, and that was a really, really great feeling for me. It feels like home. I've only been here for a month, and I've already felt at home, and I feel very blessed to be here. And the kids, oh my goodness, I said this the first service, but I really need to write every quote that I have on Sundays down that I get from them and sell a book from it, because, oh man, their comments just make my day. I love it. So this morning I wanted to tell my story. I know a lot of you have just met me, haven't known me very long. I grew up in Paola, Kansas, and we went to Garnett Church of the Nazarene, where my mom was the children's pastor. She became the children's pastor when I was about, those are my parents, when I was about 7, around that age. And so I grew up a pastor's kid. I grew up in a family that was at the church every time the doors were open. We were at every potluck. We were at every event. We were the first ones there, the last ones to leave. The church was our life. And I got really good at living the pastor's kid life. And I loved it growing up. People were making us meals. People were so nice and loving. I loved being at church. However, in middle school was about the time that flipped for me. And I started to see church as the thing that none of my friends were doing. I began to see church as the thing I should be ashamed of. And so that's where lying really started to come into play in my life. At school, I was this person. And at church, I was this person. I made myself be whoever I thought the person in front of me wanted me to be. I lied about what my parents did. Most of the time I would tell my friends that my mom was a teacher. I would just, leave out the fact that she was a pastor, because it was like I was ashamed of that. Or I thought that they wouldn't like me as soon as they heard that my mom was a pastor. Also, most days, I would lie about the things that I did on the weekend, make myself seem cooler. I never did those things, but, why not? I want people to think I did them. And I really began to have this sense of, I have no idea who I am. Because when I'm one person here with my family and at church, and I'm one person here at school, I didn't know some days which one to be. I didn't know which one I liked more. I didn't know which one people liked more. I didn't know who I was. Because I was a different person to everybody I was around, depending on what they liked or what they thought of me or what I wanted them to think of me. And so my relationship with God was also pretty much non-existent, because I didn't know who I was in God either. I didn't know who to be to God. I couldn't be myself to my family. I couldn't be myself to my friends. How was I supposed to be myself to God if I didn't even know who that was? So yeah, most days it was all an act. Most days I would wake up on Sunday morning, put on a smile, be the perfect little pastor's kid, come home, be another kid, go to school, be another kid. And it really affected the relationships in my life because none of them were real. None of them had meaning. None of them truly loved me for who I was because I was never truly who I was to them. And so I found myself constantly feeling alone, feeling rejected, feeling isolated, feeling not good enough. I really, most days, would wake up and wish I was somebody else. And so I tried to make myself somebody else. And it didn't work. Because God made me to be who He wanted me to be. But I couldn't live into who He wanted me to be. I pushed that to the side, and I was who I thought everybody else wanted me to be. And so my struggles with self-confidence and my identity continued, and went into high school, and I was constantly having new friends. I was constantly changing who I was. My family sometimes couldn't even keep up with who I was. They didn't know how to talk to me some days because I was different. I kept changing who I was around them. And so my junior year, my dad and my mom actually told us that they felt called to plant a church. And that was an exciting but also terrifying thought for me because they were planting a church in my town. I couldn't hide from the fact that I was a pastor's kid anymore. I couldn't hide from the fact that I was raised in a Christian home. I couldn't hide from the fact that ministry was what I grew up in. And that honestly saved me. My parents had this group of people that they planted the church with, and those families had teens that were my age, and there was a group of about 4 of us. That was our youth group. And they were amazing. They saw me, those teens saw me for who I was. I began to spend my weekends with them. They were constantly over at our house because they knew my parents, they knew my family. I couldn't be somebody else to them because my worlds clashed. My church life and my school life clashed with these people. They knew everything about me. I couldn't hide that. And I liked that feeling. I started to be honest with this group of teens. I started to let them see me for who I was. And shocker, they were still my friends. And that was amazing to me because I, in my mind, thought that that wasn't possible. And so around this time is also when I received my calling into ministry. I began to, in our youth group, we would meet on Wednesday nights, and I began to write our Bible studies that we would do that night. And I began to start planning things, and I felt God say, like, this is what I want you to do. And I had no idea what I was doing. I remember telling my parents that I felt a calling into ministry, and my dad told me I was crazy. Because, again, they didn't know me. And I had always been this timid, fearful person, and I remember my dad saying, in ministry you have to be vulnerable. Can you be vulnerable? You have to be real in ministry. And I remember them asking me, are you sure you don't want to do art? Are you sure, this is really what you want to do? And I said, yeah. And I went to MNU totally afraid, really not knowing. I think a part of me, we actually talked about this last night, I think a part of me also went into ministry hoping to be my parents' favorite, if that makes sense, hoping that in some ways I would make them proud going into ministry. I think that was a little part of it. Again, that's the people pleaser in me. That's me wanting to tell people what they want to hear. And so I went to MNU, pursuing youth ministry. I also never really had a lead female pastor in my life, but I did have female youth pastors in my life, and so I pursued youth ministry. And I began to get that sense of I'm not good enough again. And at college, I remember thinking freshman year, all right, I can be whoever I want to be to these people. They don't know me. I can make up whoever I want. And that's what I did. I found myself lying about where I came from, things that I did. I wanted myself to seem interesting to these people. I wanted to be liked. I even remember lying about my major that I went into, and these people went to college with me. They would find out that I was a ministry major, but it was like I just didn't want anybody to know. And I still found myself ashamed of my calling. I found myself ashamed of the church, because even at this Christian college, sometimes it wasn't the popular thing to be. And I remember going to, I worked at Golden Bell the summer after my freshman year. And the verse that was the verse of our summer was Joshua 1:9, which I would encourage you guys to open your Bibles to Joshua 1:9 with me. And this verse says, "Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And as I read that, I found myself wondering what that's like. Being strong, being courageous. Because I had never felt that before. I didn't know what courage was. Most days, I didn't even have enough courage to tell people who I really was. But as I went on, that verse just really stuck in my head, and I kept thinking about it. Be strong and courageous, for I'm with you. And I really broke down when I came back from Golden Bell, and I still had that verse on my mind, and I actually made that my life verse, because that's something that I constantly need to remind myself of. Even though we're not strong, we're not courageous most days. I'm not. God gives me that strength. God gives me that courage. Why wouldn't I want to share that with the world? Why am I so afraid to show people what God has done for me? Why am I so afraid to show people what God can do for them? Why am I so ashamed of that? Because the world tells me to be? I just wanted to be liked so much that I was willing to change everything about me to fit one little mold. And then another, and then another, and then another. When God has one, and it's the way He made you. So, I started interning at College Church after I came back from Golden Bell. And I had two great mentors. Jen Rosema was the middle school youth pastor, and James Abbott was the children's pastor there. And these two really saw me for who I was, and they wanted to see me for who I was. They really, really poured a lot into me, and I remember them saying at one of our intern meetings, I remember Jen just looking at me and saying, "Why are you saying everything I want to hear? Why are you just saying what you think I want to hear? Who are you? We want to know you. We want to know your thoughts. We don't want to know what we know. We want to know what you know. We asked for your input. And it was after that that they really started encouraging me to just be myself. And I really needed that at the time. I needed somebody to say, we want to know you because you are beautiful just the way you are. I'd never had really anybody call that out in me other than that group of teens at our church. And so having somebody call that out in me and making sure that I was following through with being myself was really important for me. They really, really poured into me and made sure that my ministry reflected God and reflected the person God made me to be. And didn't reflect who I thought somebody wanted me to be standing at the pulpit. And so it was also around this time, I interned in the middle school youth group, and I said it first service, but I love middle schoolers. I love the awkwardness. I love the laughs. I love the free spirit of middle schoolers. But I also felt a calling into children's ministry, which, if you knew anything about me, you would know children's ministry, I never wanted to do it, ever. Never in my lifetime. I saw children's ministry as babysitting. I saw kids as needing to be corralled. And I never wanted to do children's ministry ever. And so it was actually while talking to James that I just felt this overwhelming sense of just try it. And I went in one Sunday. It was my first Sunday in the children's church, the first service. And this little girl came up to me and looked at me, and she just says, I hope to be as beautiful as you are when I grow up. And for me, hearing those words was really hard because I didn't see myself as beautiful. I didn't see myself as created in God's image. I saw myself as somebody who needed to wear makeup and hide. And so it was then, that Sunday, when I realized that I was called into children's ministry because these kids minister to me just as much as I minister to them. They remind me, you're beautiful. Kids are honest. They are so honest. I was saying, I think it was Lila, the first Sunday I was here, I was wearing jeans. I don't know what shirt I was wearing, but she just told me that she didn't think my combo went together. And the honesty and the way that kids see the world is amazing to me. And that's something that I wish we would carry on as adults. I wish our view of the world never got shifted. And so I began to search out what this calling into children's ministry meant for me. Because I had always had my mindset on youth ministry. I had interned in youth ministry for 2 years. Like that I was set. I was looking at youth groups. I was ready to go, and then God just kind of shifted my world, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so it was also around this time that I really began to struggle again with seeing myself as God saw me. And I made it my mission statement to, in children's ministry, the reason why God put me here, the reason why God called me to children's ministry is so that I can help kids see themselves and love themselves the way God loves them and hold on to that before the world tells them not to. Because that's what I needed as a kid. I needed to see myself and love myself the way God loves me, and I needed to hold on to that. That childlike faith is something that I think God calls us to for a reason. He calls us to be strong. He calls us to be courageous. He calls us to love people like kids love people. He calls us to see the good in others. He calls us to not be afraid. He calls us to show his love. He calls us to live out his love. And that's something that verse, Joshua 1:9, reminds me of every day. And that is why I've made it my life verse. That's why it's in the back of my mind every day, because it's something I need to remind myself of every day. I need that strength that only God can give. I need that courage that only God can give. I need to be reminded that he loves me. Even when I feel at my lowest, he loves me. And that's how I feel about kids, too. I can come in at my lowest on Sunday mornings, and they just look at me and smile. And they see the good. They see the fun. They love me for who I am. I don't have to be somebody I'm not to kids. They just want to know that you love them and that you can have fun and that you can see them for who they are. As a follower of Christ, I want to challenge you guys with this. Are you truly living into who he made you to be? No matter where you've come from, no matter what you've done, no matter what you think of yourself, you have been redeemed. You have been called. You've been called to share your story. You've been called to share his love. Are you truly living into that, or are you crippled by this fear of what will people think? Are you crippled by this fear of who's going to listen anyways? Are you being strong and courageous? Are you seeking God's strength? Are you seeking God's courage? We will never fully be able to do what God has called us to do if we're letting that fear hold us back.